Well, spring practice is in the thick of it for UCLA football. But who's going to stick out in the wide receiver room in 2023? Well, we have some names in mind, and we'll tell you here on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody. It's Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer alongside Max Kelton. Thanks for making Locked On UCLA your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcasts. So like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Download, subscribe on all those podcast platforms. Thanks for making it your first listen each and every day. It's your team every day. Become an everydayer. Come enjoy all the episodes of Locked On at UCLA. Every day, every episode. Stay up to date. We're talking UCLA football to start here, as the Bruins are getting in the thick of things in spring practice. We've got some names. We've talked about the wide receivers before in December when I was solo. The Max will kind of provide a little bit of some thoughts. We'll go back and forth to really start this episode. In my mind, these are the top 7 receiving targets potentially for UCLA this year, not including tight ends, not including running backs, Max. You've got Jeremiah McClure, Grant Gray. Those are true freshmen coming in. It's a little tough getting out of high school early and making that transition. They're not all Dante Moores who jump from Detroit and get to practice early. You've got Kyle Ford, J. Michael Sturdivant, who are the big name transfers from SC and Cal. And then you've got Cam Brown, the leading returning receiver, Logan Loya, and Titus MOKIAO-ATIMALALA. And we're going to try and decide today, Max, who we truly think will be the receivers that will end up being amongst the top 3 this season for UCLA.
First name has to be, for me, J. Michael Sturdivant. This is a Cal transfer who earned freshman All-American honors last year, had 7 touchdowns for the Golden Bears, 700 some odd yards, 755-ish. He's a really good player. And he's young, and they're looking to develop a connection early on with him and Dante Moore. So I would expect that Dante Moore and Sturdivant, they not only develop some chemistry in spring practice, but I think that he's going to be that key player for Dante Moore moving forward, especially at the wideout spot. I mean, he's a versatile guy, so I think he's number 1 for me.
Yeah, Sturdivant had a big, long touchdown grab, I believe, at the end or during one of those practices recently. Sturdivant, of course, he caught a touchdown against UCLA. This season, Sturdivant, overall, his numbers in 2022, 65 receptions, 755 yards, 7 touchdowns, averaging nearly 63 yards per game, including along of a 48-yard reception. We remember what he did to the Bruins around on Black Friday, right after Thanksgiving in November. So that's Chip Kelly likes to say, you really balled out against us, so we're going to take against you. I'm thinking, hey, the leading returning receiver, Cam Brown, he really turned it on, I think, down the stretch in my perspective. What about Cam Brown? He's coming back. He's the transfer coming over from the state of Texas. Brown had 24 receptions, 362 yards, 3 touchdowns. And while I'm not going to debate with you, he is going to be a number 1 receiver. I'm not thinking if Kyle Ford's healthy, he can't be better than this. Sturdivant coming in is the number 1. I'm thinking Cam Brown will be a truly productive receiver and a high-value number 2 for someone who had a 51-yard catch, one of the longer catches last year for UCLA, and he averaged about 32 receiving yards per game. Because UCLA last year, they really spread the receptions out. They threw the ball all around their receiving core. If you're playing fantasy college football, I'm not sure if a UCLA receiver is what you wanted to take last year in 2022. In my mind, I think Brown's very underrated. And while there is some significant talent, we still have to see what McClure and Gray bring to the team when they're fully ready and prepared, getting through the thick of things in fall camp. I think Cam Brown, as that returning man, there's something about being that leading returner that sticks in my mind as saying, hey, this is a guy that could get a bulk of the passes, although it's a little different when you see who has chemistry with which signal caller, which could truly factor as to which guy could stand out this year in the receiving core.
You're absolutely right, and there's some serious value to being a returner in a very complex NFL scheme that Chip Kelly is running, and a guy like Cam Brown heading back under Kelly in another year. I mean, it gives him that advantage over the rest of the wide receiver room, including a guy like J. Michael Sturdivant, who is still in his first year learning a scheme that might not have been, with Cal, he might not have had such a complex offensive look. So, you lose your two top pass catchers last year, Bobo and Kashmir Allen, and there's room for somebody to step up, and you have to imagine it's not going to be all new names. So I think Cam Brown is a really likely name to light up the stat sheet. Maybe not be the sole pass catcher for Dante Moore, and this is us now. Maybe implicating Dante Moore as the starting quarterback. We don't know that. It could be a totally different story, and I think that's what makes spring practice so exciting. But I like Cam Brown to step into a role where he's going to get some serious playing time and put up some production too.
I'm on the bandwagon. I'm going to be on record on the bandwagon. Start Dante Moore. I know Garbers has been waiting his turn. I know Colin Schley is the talent. Even Justin Martin might go in there and have a fairly tough camp. You just never know. Even Chase Griffin, who is the NIL Male Athlete of the Year, I believe in 2022, they all got their great qualities. I'm just saying, hey, why not start Dante Moore? But that's not what this episode's about. I've already said that before. I think an X factor into someone who can really break out this year for UCLA in the receiving core, mind you, we're not talking running backs who can catch passes. We're not talking even Moliki Matavao, the latest transfer Oregon in terms of the tight end room, or even Hudson Habermill, who had quite a few touchdown grabs last year, a couple, I believe, Habermill having 2. We're talking exclusively receivers in this episode, in this first segment. For me, a breakout guy to look out for. I know Kyle Ford has a lot of upside, but with his injury risk, you don't know. I'm going to go with the returner again, Titus MOKIAO-ATIMALALA. I think that's a guy who, despite his numbers last year, 17 receptions, 290 yards and a touchdown, along of a 49-yard grab, despite playing in every game for UCLA, all 13, and that's not too many yards per game, 22. I think he is destined potentially for a breakout season in the wide receiver room for UCLA. I know Ford's got upside. We've got a couple of freshmen. Even Loyo would have something to say about that. You just never know who could catch more passes. Last year, Zach Charbonnet was top 4. He had more receptions and receiving yards than the likes of MOKIAO-ATIMALALA, but somebody's got to catch the ball. I think it is his turn to step up and have an opportunity this season, Max.
I think you're pretty spot on with what you're saying too. And as much as I like seeing that from the older players and guys who hadn't had as much time on the field, before, I also want to see production from some of the younger guys, and frankly, you don't see it too often. So that's why I'm excited to see what a guy like Jeremiah McClure can do. A guy out of Mater Dei. He's familiar with the area. Mater Dei, one of the best football basketball schools in the
Mater
country.
Dei.
Mater Dei, excuse me. No doubt about it. I think that this young man could be valuable in the second half of the season, but again, it's a huge learning curve. Nobody's going to come in ready to go, especially the freshmen. So I think that you could be looking for a guy like McClure. Who is it? Grant Gray is the other freshman. I think that Chip Kelly is going to look to build chemistry between those two guys and their freshman star quarterback, or what is presumed to be their freshman star quarterback. I could see them getting some really good run on the practice field and maybe making it into a few games, getting serious playing time. But I wouldn't expect them to be the stars, but I could see them making a difference.
Yeah, we'll see how those things all play out coming up here in the upcoming weeks in spring practice, heading into summer and fall camp, and eventually the home opener, the season opener in 2023 versus Coastal Carolina. That is your early discussions of the UCLA wide receiving core. We'll come back. We'll talk some UCLA softball. What's going on this weekend? They're heading to Arizona. What does that mean? Max gives us his brief thoughts. He's called some UCLA softball games this year. He'll tell us his thoughts. But if he was hungry, what he's going to eat during a softball game. I think he should, and he knows this too. He knows this if he's sitting there. Man, I'm hungry. You can't have a big meal during a broadcast. What's something you can eat? If you're just sitting at home listening and watching to this, you just want to munch on something real quick. It is a Built Bar. You've got to try a Built Bar because it doesn't have all the sugar and calories of everything else. It's a delicious snack, but the best tasting protein bar ever. It's healthy, and it's 100% real dark chocolate. It's real chocolate. That's what you want. Churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. Not entirely sure how Built does it, but it's only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. You can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club while you can and get specialty flavors right at Built.com. And go get yourself a 4-bar box, a 13-bar box, cookies and cream. They've got so many variety of flavors. You're going to want to go to Built.com or your local grocery store, or Walmart, Sam's Club, and get one today. Cruising on in second segment of Locked On UCLA, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer alongside Max Kelton here. We're talking UCLA softball fairly briefly. I mentioned it a little bit earlier this week, but Max, a little more in-depth knowledge about the softball team, I'll admit, than I do. 36-4. They've won 9 in a row, 16-1 at home. I'm not entirely sure if you broadcast that loss at home, but they're 16-1 at home, 14-1 in neutral site games. And despite their early conference woes of losing a game or two here, they've really picked things up. And what do the Wildcats bring as a challenge for UCLA, and who's been stepping up for the Bruins?
Well, this is a team where it seems like every week a new player is stepping up, but I've been very impressed by a player like Jordan Woolery as of late. She had 2 home runs in the series opener against an Oregon State team that made it to the Women's College World Series last year, and then she had another one in the sweep win in the 3rd game. This is a team that's won 8 straight. They have again been bumped up to the number 2 team in the country, and aside from number 1, where Oklahoma just seems to have run away with that first spot heading into the final stretch of the season, the Bruins seem like the only real team. Maybe Oklahoma State I could see, but the real Pac-12 foe that could give anybody a run for their money come Women's College World Series time. I mean, all the pieces are there. Everybody's clicking. Aaliyah Jordan returning. That's huge. The Bruins are on a tear as of late, and it's a force. I would be surprised to see somebody stop this team moving down to the final stretch.
Yeah, they've got at Arizona. They get Arizona State at home. They go to Utah, and then the final weekend of the season, that first weekend of May, they don't actually have a series. But funny enough, they get to go to Tucson twice.
Yeah,
you get to go to Tucson this weekend, and then in almost a month's time from now, you go and have the first ever Pac-12 softball tournament. So I wonder how playing in a certain field and what the Pac-12 softball tournament's going to do, because that technically, which will be nationally televised on May 13th, and even the semifinal will be too, how that's going to affect with the berth. Will that actually affect UCLA seeding? Probably not, unless they lose early and whatever. But I just think that is an interesting wrinkle for UCLA's end of season tournament kind of preparation for the NCAA tournament.
I mean, it's really exciting to see for the first year this Pac-12 tournament. You know, by the way, UCLA might be the number 2 team in the nation, but they're not going to run away with this Pac-12 tournament. There are so many good teams in this conference, 3 of which are in the top 10. UCLA is number 2, Stanford number 5, Washington number 10, and that Washington team did take a game from the Bruins earlier this season, and I was on the call for it. So I know that, you know, while they might have the best record and they might have all the pieces to run away with the Pac-12 tournament, I know that's not how it's going to go, at least not without a fight. But, you know, there's just so many pieces of this conference that could make a serious difference. But when Megan Faramo is dealing the way that she has over the last couple of weeks, when Brooke Yanez is clicking in the circle and their lineup top to bottom seems like anybody could be just an absolute force. I mean, it really is exciting to watch a team dominate so much. 36-4 this year. Those 4 losses, one of which came to Oklahoma, another one was Washington in the home conference opener, and aside from that, we'll chalk up a couple others, you know, just to
Cal and to Oregon. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, another two really good teams. Oregon, number 18 in the country. Cal is receiving votes. So it's just top to bottom. This conference is so good. And you look at their schedule coming up. Arizona is also receiving votes in the top 25. Same with ASU. And I'll be on the call for all three of those games that weekend at home at Easton Stadium. So it's exciting watching this team play, and now is when they need to click the most. And I think that they have actually really hit that stride as of late for Coach Inouye Perez.
Yeah, they've hit their stride. And of course, the biggest thing is we're not talking NCAA tournament, Pac-12 tournament. We're talking going to Oklahoma City and smacking the crap out of the Sooners. That is what is the only justice that needs to be served this season. And again, we're just not going to get that answer until early June, late May, when they get through the end of the season and get through the first couple of rounds of the NCAA tournament, which we expect them to do. Although this team has played a lot of close games. They swept Stanford, and they only scored an average of 3 runs per game, which kind of averaged out to a 3-0 loss. If you play them at a tournament game, 1 game off, a lot of pressure, you don't know what's going to happen. The Bruins have the veteran and the youth presence mixed in with the pitchers dealing at the right moment. It seems like it is a recipe for success, but only time will tell as they head to Tucson this week. But we're going to end the show. One more thought about another UCLA team. What could it be? Well, we're thinking about the likes of UCLA women's volleyball. They've got a new coach, got a couple of new ads. Mac's going to have more on that when we return on Locked On UCLA. But if you're watching on YouTube or now listening, we're cruising on into Locked On UCLA's final segment, UCLA women's volleyball. They didn't have a good season this recent season, Max. The Bruins were 16-13, 10-10 in Pac-12 conference play, no NCAA tournament, and it's Alfie Reft, I believe the associate head coach coming over from the University of San Diego. The Toreros had a dream season this year at the WCC, and the Bruins just got a couple of new ads. Can you shed some light on that, Max? What is this team potentially looking like in 2023 with the new coach and some new late ads this late in the recruiting season in April?
Well, University of San Diego, by the way, it was maybe the best story I've seen in all of collegiate volleyball over the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, this is a team that had never made a run. Think SDSU in the men's tournament, the men's basketball tournament, by the way, but had never really shown signs of making a run prior to that, too. And it's a really good program with good pieces, but it was the coaching that was able to fuel this fire. And I think that's what's so exciting about Alfie coming over to coach at UCLA. He knows what it takes to win in that tournament. And for a team that didn't make the tournament last year, I think that they needed a new look at head coach. And Alfie Reft is going to help this cause. I was so impressed, much like the rest of the country was when you saw that run for University of San Diego last year. That talk about a Cinderella team. Now they were a 2 seed, but it was a team that really had not had that kind of success at this volume prior to last year. And it was just impressive what that coaching staff did to build up a program into somewhat of a powerhouse last season that had hardly lost. So I'm really excited for what Alfie Reft brings to the table. And there are a couple of new players, new additions that they bring in. First, they had a Florida transfer, Hendrickson, I think is her name. I'm really excited for her. She only played a couple of games back in September of last year, but Florida is one of those marquee programs. She was looking to be a star, and I think that she could be at UCLA. They also announced the additions of a defensive specialist in Kat Lutz. She's out of Del Mar, California, went to Torrey Pines. That's a really good volleyball school down south. And then a Dallas, Texas native let me make sure. Her name is Sydney Breon. I just wanted to make sure I got that right. These are 2 freshmen who typically you're not going to see freshmen make a huge difference, but it gives you some poise to see. These are the first couple of recruits for Alfie Reft, and he has faith in them. So it might not be production this year. It certainly might as well, but I'm certainly looking forward to next year and the year after for these young freshmen to develop into the players that Reft expects them to.
Yeah, UCLA volleyball looking to get on that map and get, much better than they were last year from a 16-13 finish, 4-6 in home. They did more of their damage, frankly enough, away from home for some odd reason this year. but UCLA would like to return to being a better program in the women's volleyball ranks. They want to be a much better team as opposed to a team that doesn't make the NCAA tournament. The Big Ten, they care about their volleyball. They'll go sell it out over there in Big Ten country. Nebraska, in Lincoln, in Omaha especially, they really love their volleyball. And I know Omaha has nothing truly to do with the Big Ten, but they tend to host things in the Nebraska area, Big Ten. There's just so much love for volleyball. UCLA's got to be ready to compete in just about every sport, top to bottom, regardless if we think the Big Ten sucks in softball or baseball or is good here and there. There are sports that they bring passion, and 18,000 seats filled every night, especially for women's volleyball. So this is what UCLA is preparing themselves for. The world is about to get that much more intense moving into the future years of the Big Ten, and we think that Alfie Reft is that man to lead them into the future. Well, I think you're muted there, bud.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think you're spot on, and it's going to be a new look for this team, right? This is a team that went 10-10 in conference play last year, and it'll be their final year in the Pac-12 conference. And I feel confident that Alfie Reft is the man to lead them into that Big Ten play for one of the best volleyball conferences in the country. But when I say a new look, I mean their leading hitter in McCall. She was a grad student. She's leaving. She was a transfer from TCU. McKissick, another grad transfer from Georgia Tech. She was the leading setter. You like to think of the setter as the quarterback on the floor. She won't be back. So I think that this might be a rebuilding season for them, but again, they want to develop some momentum heading into Big Ten play next season. I'm excited to see what they can do, and if they can have some serious production with a really young squad this year, it gives promise for next year.
That's all the big things and the questions we won't have answered until the fall. Not every program can be national championship winning heading into the Big Ten, but they can put the right foot forward, the right feet forward, and take the baby steps into the right direction. We think with the recruits, people coming in, the recent additions for UCLA women's volleyball, the new coach, that the Bruins can certainly be headed into the right direction as we are headed into the end of this episode. So for Max Kelton, I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Locked On UCLA. Thanks for making it your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Tell us your thoughts about the UCLA receivers or softball or even women's volleyball, NBA draft prospects, whatever. Just throw them in there in the comments. And also kind of tell us, hey, follow us at Locked On Bruins on Twitter and download and subscribe at all the other podcast platforms. In the meantime, become an everydayer. Come listen. Join us every day. We've got fun, enticing, entertaining content every day, Monday through Friday. Your team every day on the Locked On UCLA podcast. As we end every episode, get your hands up, Bruins fans. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.